I'll move on now to Ms. Hankins. When I refer to you said or you mentioned, this is either something you've said publicly or through your publicized information or something you've said to the League. You mentioned you wish to improve the participation among citizens in city government by making information more accessible. Can you tell us how you would do that?
Sure. I think the great resource that the city isn't maximizing is the internet and social media. As a great example, a few months back, or going on a year now, the city council had before it a zone change request in my neighborhood on Lake Street. There was a public hearing, and myself, as well as some other members of the community, utilized the internet to get a petition going. And the result of that, in part, along with the grassroots effort, obviously, of just going door to door, was well over 100 people showed up to the hearing, which, watching city council meetings, it was probably the best turnout that I had seen in years. There were people from both sides there. It was great. It became a lively debate, and that's really the heart of democracy. And here we have this great vehicle available, the internet and social media, that other communities are really maximizing to get the word out and also get some younger people involved. City government has largely held the interest of working people and then homeowners and seniors, and we can start getting people involved in a younger age if we start utilizing Facebook and Twitter and some other things. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Brien, this is more or less a two-part question, so I'll try to indicate both aspects of it. In your opening remarks, you mentioned that we need to protect our environment by protecting existing open spaces, by preserving land that exists now for us. Can you be more specific about which open spaces in Waltham? I think a lot of people don't know about these open spaces. And tell us also how you would go about guaranteeing their protection for the future. Discuss the open spaces a little bit, and then tell us how you would go about protecting those spaces for the future.
Sure. I remember back in the 1970s, I used to go to the YMCA up off Lexington Street with my family during the summer. That was our summer vacation. And at that time, there was the Green Acres, there was all kinds of open space behind the YMCA, and we'd spend all day out there playing. And then eventually, they got developed. Developments went in. I remember Windsor Village went in back in the late 70s. And as a child growing up, I said, why does this, to my parents as we drive home, I'd say, why does it always seem to happen in Waltham? You drive to the border in the surrounding towns, and they don't have these developments right at the line. So when I first got elected to the council in 2000, there was an open space committee which was chaired by Councilor Turallo and Councilor Kelly. And we all worked together, and they worked to identify open spaces throughout the community and tried to target those open spaces to preserve those open spaces. And we successfully preserved over 100 acres. So there is a lot of open space. There's still a lot of open space available in Waltham. There's Sanderson Heights up in Lakeview. What's the future of the stigmatines? What's going to happen there? Is that going to get sold, and will that be developed? So we have to be proactive. The Berry Farm up by Polaroid, that's going to be preserved. So there's still a lot of open space in the city. We have to be vigilant about it. We have to make sure that we're involved. And of course, the Fernald. That's the elephant in the room. What's going to happen at the Fernald, and what role are we going to have to preserve the open space that's there? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. I'll move on now to Mr. Richardson. You stated at one point that although Waltham has a diverse population, our current city government does not reflect that diversity. How would you address this issue as a city councilor?
That's a great question. I think the best way to address that would be to get more people from the community involved in city government, more people of a diverse nature running for positions. maybe make the meetings a little bit more accessible. And of course, much as candidate Vidal has said, to reach out through community development and community programs to sort of, to citizens that might not have access or the knowledge of where to get information about Waltham and the city council and when the meetings are being held. And so I believe I would work with Councilor Vidal, if he were elected, on the community outreach. And that would be one way that I would address the diversity issue of the city council as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll turn to Mr. Vidal. You mentioned that you believe a 311 constituent services reporting and tracking system is needed in the city. How would you go about setting this up as a city councilor? And please include how you would finance this initiative.
All right. The 311, well, great question. The 311 Constituent Services Program, it's something that I learned in Somerville. I was there probably over the summer and spent about 4 hours learning about it with the Director of Constituent Services. This program was implemented there many years ago. And first, for those of you guys don't know much about the 311, it's pretty much it's a phone call that you make to 311, and then you can request for services. For example, there's a pothole in your street. You will make that call. The call will get directed to the correct department. The department will, the person taking the call will log it and track it. And that login number or ticket will be posted online on a map. And it will be tracked in a way that it will have to get done in a certain time, otherwise that tracking system will change from going from green to red, I'm sorry, green to yellow to red. So the way that this will be implemented, it's by allowing the city to study the idea. It works in Somerville, it's working in Springfield, Mass., it's also working in Newton right now. The city council needs to study the idea, be able to budget money and allocate money aside for it to happen. What it's important about the 311, and everyone needs to know this, is it also provides accountability, because what happens is once the call gets made, say, again, going to the pothole example, once that happens, you will have to follow a particular way as a department head to know that that's getting done. And that will create accountability at the department level, and you'll be able to see whether the people who are working for that department actually know, actually need more people or not to fulfill those needs from constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Cardillo, please. Also, in things that you've said publicly or things that you've responded to the league, you expressed the need to improve key infrastructures in the city. So I'm asking you if you could identify specifically what you're referring to and how, as a counselor, you would go about improving these infrastructures.
The two big things that I believe are the water system and sewer system. We have a very old water and sewer system that we have been making improvements on, but we need to do it faster, and we need to do it in a planned way so that we're not ripping up streets that we just paved. And one of the things that I've learned walking around is the streets are in deplorable conditions. You know, that's what as a city councilor, I would be on the Public Works Committee, or I'd ask to be on the Public Works Committee. I wouldn't be, you know, put myself on it, but I'd ask to be on it, or I'd sit in on those and try to voice my opinion on how important I think these two things are. There's nothing worse than going to someone's home in the middle of the night and when they have a sewer backup. It's just awful. You know, it's awful for the homeowner. It's just devastating for them. They lose so much. So that would be, I'm stopping.
Thank you. That concludes round one of the questions, and I think we had some very comprehensive and interesting answers. I appreciate that. We'll go on to round two, and I'll begin this round with a question from Ms. Hankins. As a counselor, what type of constituent services do you anticipate providing specifically?
My vision of city councilor is to really act as a liaison between the constituents of the city and city government. City government can sometimes be a little overwhelming. It can be, you don't know where to begin if you have a problem. And I think as a city councilor, before you get in, or at least, early on, you should really be learning who to go to for what departments service what, and be able to relay that to your constituents. And if they come to you with a problem, or if you can't anticipate a problem, let them know where they can go for what. In that same regard, I believe it is critical that a city councilor is an advocate for the constituents in the community.
Thank you. Mr. O'Brien, I was provided by a statement from Watch, which says that, as follows, with 5,000 people on the waiting list for public housing in Waltham and 9,000 people eligible but not able to access affordable housing, and yet with no new affordable housing created in Waltham since 1995, the issue arises about promoting affordable housing in the city. So the League of Women Voters supports an increase in the affordable housing supply. As a counselor, how might Waltham creatively add to the city's affordable housing?
Well, I think the key thing is with the 8 new schools that we built over the last 10 years, there are some surplus school buildings that could be used for affordable housing. I think of the Bank School, I think of the Fitch on the south side, I think of also think of the Harding School on Lake Street. That's taken too long to get that done. So, I think we need to identify some of these spaces, buildings that can be used for affordable housing. I think a component of that we can't forget about is the homeowner who's out there, maybe the empty nester who's there, who's struggling to pay their bills too, who are paying their tax bill. They may be a widow, live by themselves, and they're struggling to pay their tax bills as well. So affordable housing is complex. I mean, if you look right next door, look at the great thing that St. Mary's did with that old building right next door here. They made that into a first-class housing facility. So I think it's a matter of, looking for new opportunities like that to replicate what was done here at St. Mary's. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next question will be for Mr. Richardson. As someone who works at the polls regularly and has worked at the polls for many years, I am very frustrated by the low voter turnout in some of Waltham's elections. For instance, for the September preliminary election, the turnout rate was, I believe, below 7%. That's abysmally low. What can be done as a city councilor? What can be done to increase voter turnout, voter awareness, voter interest, voter concern, so that we get a little better representation at the polls?
Well, I have to echo my response to the first question and say community outreach. If people know how it affects them, they're more likely to turn out to vote. And who they vote for will matter much more to them if they know what that person is going to be doing. So I think education as part of that community outreach on services that the city provides or votes that are coming up are very important to increasing voter turnout. And then I also agree with candidate Hankins that the social media aspect and getting young people involved will also increase voter turnout. So if we had campaigns on Facebook saying when to vote, how to register to vote, going to different local universities and speaking to students and trying to meet these students that live in the community that intend to stay here for the summer and after they graduate and get them involved in the community. All of those things will increase voter turnout.